so many different parts to learning something, but hearing is the most important part of it and listening. So
Hi, Ailey. Thank you so much for coming to Harp Connections. It's really nice to meet you.
pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Okay. So first thing first, I'm a Canadian, and I know you have a Larry Fisher harp sitting right behind you.
I do,
I
yes.
have read the story or hear your story about how your harp had went to Beijing and finally get
Yes.
back to you. But I'm more interested in about what drew you into getting a Larry Fisher harp because we're Canadians.
So I was doing a lot of teaching over in Canada and the States at one point. Kind of every year I was going out and doing summer schools there, and I kept coming across these gorgeous harps and thinking like, what are these? And so everyone said, oh yeah, they're Larry Fishers. And there was a maker in Ireland who was very popular called Larry Eager, but he had stopped making, and a lot of the Irish players had moved on to playing Fishers instead because they were sort of the most similar.
Oh,
So
that's so interesting.
eventually I saved up enough and got on the waiting list, and yeah, a few years later finally got mine, and I love
Oh,
it.
that's awesome. So you have been playing the harp for a long time, but you have
Yes.
also been composing. If I do the math wrong, it's around 2011. Is that when you start composing?
Yeah, that's probably about right. Yeah.
Yeah. So what drew you to want to be a composer, and how did that sort of play into your harp playing?
Composing was always something I was doing. Like I was always writing tunes and making things up and singing little ditties. If you lived with me, I would drive you crazy because I'm always making up stupid little songs as I go around my house. Um, but I suppose it became more serious when I was back from kind of 2006 onwards. I was touring a lot, and I was touring with a band, and we were, and still in non-COVID times, were on the road for up to about 8 or 9 months of the year, which was fantastic, and really getting to see the world and play music. And that was great. But one of the things was that it became very hard in a band, everything's collaborative. And I guess it got to a point where I really needed to express my own creativity in a way that was just authentic, just for myself, and to be playing music that was just that wasn't always having to go through this like demographic process of 5 people first. So it sort of became this little escape on tour. It was a way, first of all, just to kind of get away from feeling like I was in a hotel room in all the hours of sitting doing nothing. It was something exciting to do, and yeah, it just allowed me to kind of speak what I was feeling at that time, and express kind of how I was feeling, and what emotions I was having on the road. So yeah, so it sort of became something that became more and more important to me. And then I went back, and when I was 28, I decided to go back to university and do a master's in composition, and then that turned into a PhD. And yeah, now it's a very big part of my life.
That's awesome. You write for many other instruments as well, from what I've read in your website.
Yeah.
How is that different than composing for the harp, especially for the type of Celtic harp music that you write? Are they very different, or do you see some similarities in it? Do they come differently for you when writing for other instruments versus the harp?
I think I think they do, but I think the core values are the same. With all of them, I suppose the things that always drive me are an interest in color. So color and texture, and light and shade are always kind of my key things that I'm really drawn to. So I think that although my music that I write for orchestra will obviously sound very different to what I write for Celtic harp, especially because of the tonality of the instrument and limitations with that, I think the fundamental values of the music are quite similar. And I think that often even my very contemporary classical work will have some Celtic feel in it, and vice versa sometimes.
It's interesting that you mentioned lights and shadows and the colors, because I'm a photographer, and those are the kind of
Mm,
things that I pay attention to. And I think for me, when a musician drew me into it, it's almost the same qualities that comes out, that complexity in their music that makes me
definitely.
appreciate it. And you have to almost do it in a way that is not too contrived. So it's a very special set of skill, in my opinion, to be able to
Mhm.
write colorful music without making it too much. I guess it's the
And the
way I
same to
put.
be able to play it. It's one of those things that it's very hard to teach that just sort of innate musicality to somebody. You can have students who play every page on every note on the page completely right, but it still doesn't have the sort of just that quality quality to it, and then you suddenly hear somebody who has it and you just think, yes, like I could listen to you all day. It's very interesting. It's sort of intangible, this thing, but it's so
Yeah,
important.
it is. And that's a very good segue into one of my favorite questions that I prepared for you. You written a song called 10,000 Days and Nights for the
Mhm.
album Traditional Spirit. And I have listened to the album version, which is absolutely gorgeous. And then I came across a video of you playing it live in a concert
Mhm.
in 2017. And it was a harp solo, and it has a completely different feel. Still gorgeous, but it's just a very different interpretations. Can you tell us more about the inspiration behind the piece? And I have the sheet music, so I want to learn it. So what might be some tips for us as harpists if we want to tackle that piece?
Yeah, totally. So the inspiration for that piece was it's part of a bigger suite of music, this traditional spirit suite. And that was a suite of music that was all written about the whiskey industry in Scotland. And so kind of the whole album goes through different phases of it. But during that writing process, I spent a lot of time with distillers and at distilleries, kind of talking to them and getting to know really about the craft. And in that process, I guess it really struck me that there was a lot of similarities between whiskey making and traditional music. And first of all, was that the way it's very much handed down from kind of generation to generation, with a lot of respect for what's come before, and always trying to kind of keep the idea about tradition and what it is so important in whiskey making. So even though they can automate a lot of it, they're still kind of keeping true to the ways. And then one of the other big things that really struck me was how much waiting is involved in making whiskey. Like once you've actually made the whiskey, then you put it into the barrels and then you wait. And the longer you wait, the better your whiskey is, of course, and the more expensive your whiskey will be. But there's like a huge amount of faith that's involved in that process. Like you have to be willing to wait for 30 years with the knowledge that it might not turn out the way you think it would. And I guess that sort of struck this parallel with me. In Scottish music, we have so many songs about waiting, and normally they're written from a woman's perspective, that is waiting for a man to come home from sea, or waiting for a man to come home from war, or whatever it might be. There's an awful lot of songs about kind of lamenting and waiting. So yeah, there was this nice parallel about this requirement for to wait for something that will be worth it. And I guess as well, it sort of turned into this, like, it sounds really tongue in cheek. It's this love song really between the distiller and his whiskey. That's how I think of it. The full title is 10,000 Days and Nights I Will Wait for You. And 10,000 days is approximately how long it would take to make a 30-year
Wow.
old whiskey. So I mean, it's such a long period of time. And also, I wrote it at a time when, with my partner, we got together, but we were in a long distance relationship, and I was always away, and there was this big period of time where we didn't know when we were going to next see each other. So it was sort of it had lots of things tying into it. But yeah, I mean, it's a very romantic song, really at heart.
Yeah, for sure. Because when if I don't know, it was written for or a whiskey inspired song, and I look at
Mhm.
the song and how you play it and the title, it to me it just come across as a love song. And then of course, there's love can be expressed in so many ways. And in this particular incident, you're talking about the whiskey maker waiting for the
Yeah.
whiskey, right? But it can transcend into so many different contexts. And I think sometimes that's
Exactly.
what make music so relatable in a broader sense. You can sort of take in that interpretation and make
Definitely.
it into something that means for you. So in terms of playing the song, what might be some of the
Mhm.
things that we should look out for when we're learning it? Do you have any suggestions?
So I guess there's a couple of kind of technical things that are big. There's a lot of two against three feel in it, so that's kind of one of the first things that technically you need to get very comfortable with playing those in the left hand. You've got these moving moving quavers, and then in the right hand you've got these duplets against it. So you kind of always get this these cross rhythms coming up. So that's kind of the biggest technical thing really to look for. And then in terms of playing it, there's these very big leaps in the melody, kind of up a ninth, I think, and then back down a seventh, and they should just sound really like yearning. They need to be full of that feeling of longing in them. It's all about yeah, just this longing for somebody really. So I think that's the thing to keep in mind.
For sure. So if you're interested in checking out the song, I know it is available on Spotify and also in your Bandcamp store. So we'll put some links into the description, and the
Great,
sheet
thank you.
music is available in your web store. Now, speaking of sheet music, I know you published 7 volumes of harp sheet music, and there's so many more. What can we expect from your harp music when we purchase them and want to play 'em? What kind of flavors are we going to get?
So the two books that I have that are closest to my own personal style of how I would play are My Little Lights book and First Things First, because those are exact transcriptions of albums that I've done, or as close to exact transcriptions as they can be. So I guess my own style is definitely informed and based around traditional music, but there's a slight sort of jazzy edge to it sometimes, and there's I guess most of them are kind of a mixture of my own compositions and traditional music. So it's sort of finding a meeting place for those two things that feels authentic to me. But really, I think what ties all my music together again is that interest in shape and in melody and in especially in the dance music, in really getting that feeling of lightness into the music, and having a really good swing in it. I suppose those are the things that I try to get over in my arrangements.
Mhm. And one of the ways that I know, and for sure for my team, to access your music is through your patron. So we
Yes.
are your sheet music sweeties, is what we are. And we get 2 harp sheet music in either the intermediate or elementary level, and then there's the more advanced one, along with the videos. And I found them to be quite helpful. So even though I have a teacher and we work on the stuff, and when I learn a new piece of music, having someone to sort of walk it through and break it down for me if I want to learn it on my own, because there's only so much I can cram into a lesson. So I have a lot of
Yeah.
extra harp curricular activities. It has been incredibly helpful. And for my teammate, Angela, she's the one in harp connections with no teacher at the moment, so she's
Mhm.
a very different self-learner, but she's on her own. So your video lessons had really helped her in adding to her repertoire and learning new music. But what I
Oh,
found interesting is there's also something called a harp talk video chat, and in that level we get to spend time with you in a harp circle. So I want you to talk about how that might benefit from harp learner like Angela, who, she's past the beginner level, she's ready to take on something a little bit more challenging. Is that something that is going to be helpful to advance her skill? And what can she expect if she want to join the harp circle?
I mean, I definitely hope so. What the purpose of the harp circle really is, it's not about a harp circle in terms of playing together. It's much more about talking about issues that come up for harp players. So, like, we did a whole session about developing good practice routines. We've done sessions about performance anxiety and ways to
Mm.
manage your mind, and kind of all about the mentality of playing. We've done quite a few sessions, sorry, on certain parts of technique or ornamentation, triplets, things like that. So generally, I just tend to ask, like, what are kind of people's pain points at that point in time? What are the things that they're struggling with, and what would they like to speak about? And so generally, we'll frame it. I'll maybe kind of give almost like a not a lecture for half an hour, but a sort of talk about something that I hope will
Great.
be interesting, and then there's a chance for people to ask their questions as well, and they sort of evolve very naturally into discussions. But it's just a nice way for people to touch base with other people who are also learning the same repertoire, and therefore also probably coming up against the same problems as them. And often, like, if there's only a few on the call, like, I'll get people to demonstrate things, and if they
Mm.
have their harps there, and to listen to each other and see what's working and what's not, and things like that. And because you learn so much when you obviously learn a lot when you have your own lessons, but I also think that you learn a huge amount from watching somebody else play, and seeing what's going on with their technique and what's maybe not working in their technique, and kind of learning that way as well. So yeah, I guess it's about having a more holistic approach to harp playing than just simply about what are the notes and what order do we play them in. It's much more about kind of musicality as a whole.
For sure. I think it brings in that sort of community aspect of
Mm.
being a musician. And I know, even again, like, I have a teacher and I meet with him once a week. I still have a bunch of harp friends that we will converse on, like you said, the pain points. And those are not topics that sometimes we would like to admit we have, because we would like to think we know what we're doing, but the reality of harp playing is, I found, once you get over the beginner's hump, there's a huge learning curve to sort of get your technique up to speed, and there's always the desire for us to get there somehow. And I think with technologies like what we're able to do now, as connecting over virtually and talk about a very focused topic, can be very helpful in advancing our skills, for sure. And along those lines, you have a lot of other learning resource for adult harp learners, such as your online harp school, and you have some workshops and whatnot. How do you find these group learning opportunities in general, and also the individual self-paced? Which one would you recommend for people in what circumstances, or when should we look into something that is more self-paced, and then when should we dive into something that is more of a group learning? Is there an ideal, or what do you think?
I think it depends very much on your own personality type, for a start, about which is going to suit you. I think self-paced things are great if you're quite disciplined, and if you know that you're going to do the work, then they're really good. Although there is still, like, even with that, there's kind of regular check-ins each week and things. But I think the reason I set up my online harp school, there's kind of 2 levels at the moment, hopefully there'll be a third soon, was I was aware that for a lot of beginners who are teaching themselves or sort of learning from video lessons, there's a lot of resources out there, but there's no order to it. So it's very easy to start dipping in and out of things, and there's a video lesson here and a video lesson there, but kind of concepts and techniques aren't being brought in progressively, therefore, and that just ends up with, unfortunately, bad technique developing quite a lot of the time. So I wanted to have something that allowed people anywhere in the world to be able to access tuition that just made sense in the order that things were brought in. And I guess after 15 years of teaching people, I've got a really good sense of how quickly you can progress from one technique to the next, and how quickly you can increase the complexity of the music that you're playing. Because I find, especially with adult learners, one of the hardest things with adult learners is very often they've already played an instrument when they were a kid or a teenager, and so
Case in point.
So they're very musical already, and they want to run before they can walk. And I mean, we all do. It's the hardest thing in the world, is to put the brakes on and to realize that, like, getting really good foundations will allow you to go so much faster in the end. So there's this kind of, I see it all the time. People are like, well, I can read the sheet music for this one, so I should be able to play it. And it's like, but that's only one little part of the skill, like reading the sheet music at a certain level. There's so much else that goes into it. So I back to your question about what's right when. I think, again, it comes down to what's your preferred way of learning. These workshops that I've started doing online, again, it was kind of, that was really a response to being asked the same questions again and again by people. One of the questions I was always getting was, how do you arrange well for harp? So I decided to do a workshop on that. One of the things I get asked very frequently is, how do I play faster, and how do I play dance tunes up to speed? So I decided to do a kind of dexterity workshop, and then I wanted one for specifically aimed really at elementary self-taught players who needed a little bit of technique tweaking and things like that. So I guess I'm just always looking for things that will appeal to people that maybe aren't getting, there's so much information out there already, but there are certain gaps, so trying to find where those gaps are and help people with that.
And I really resonate with you about learning wanting to run before we can walk, because I had a piano background, and I look at the sheet music, I'm like, yes, I can totally do this. Then I put my hands on the harp, I'm like, maybe not, right? So I think when I think about my piano days, as much as I don't like the piano, and that's why I switched to the harp, the structure of following a curriculum certainly benefit in my understanding. So I can definitely see that working the same way in learning the harp, having a little bit of that progression. And it's the same really
with my Patreon, because I found that, I could have just put up sheet music for people, and many people can read the music, they could sight read it, and it would be fine. But it's a very different process to go through learning from a video tutorial. And I feel that if the tutorials aren't long, they maybe take 40 minutes. But if you actually go through that step by step, the chances are at the end, you can play it much better than if you just simply looked at the sheet and tried to learn it from there, because you're hearing it as you go, and it's, there's so many different parts to learning something, but hearing is the most important part of it, and listening. So
Yes, so
yeah.
I just try to tackle the Prelude polka because that was one of the ones
Great.
that you published recently. And I found that when I listen to you in terms of, okay, let's work on the right hand first and get that really solid, then, it's almost like I'm getting that instruction from you without necessarily, being in the same room, but still very variable instruction. And then as you talk about how the notes move from, one note to another, that extra level of sort of auditory instruction really helps cement how my hands should be moving in the harp. And I
Yeah.
find it really increased my ability to learn the piece as opposed to me just trying to figure it out on my own. So
Yes, which
thank
is
you very
really
much for
nice.
creating those little
Oh, I'm glad
videos.
it
They're
helps.
very helpful. And our entire team has decided to sign up for your arranging for the Celtic Harp workshop. So
Oh, fun.
sorry for the people out there who want to try to sign up for the workshop. It is sort of part of that is our problem because all three of us are coming. But you have added extra workshop, and are we going to
Yeah.
see more of these workshops in the future from you?
I hope so. I mean, I'm really interested to see what will happen when lockdown sort of ends. Whether there will still be a demand for online things, because certainly not, I would never have dreamed of doing any of these before last year, and especially the Winter Harp Festival that I organised in January. That would never have happened, I don't think, because I never would have believed that the demand would be there. But I think that this year has shown everybody that online learning really does work, and actually there's so many benefits to it. Like, it's so obviously we all miss the personal interaction. It's not the same not being in a group with other people, but for learning, it's pretty big advantage not to be in a room with 20 other learners and have all that noise the whole time, and to still be able to ask your questions and to know that it's recorded so you can go back and watch it as many times as you need, or if you haven't kept up, that's fine because you can just replay it as many times as you need. So I hope that the interest for people will still be there, and I think there will still be people who are in parts of the world where they don't have easy access to tuition. So yeah, I mean, it's something that I love teaching, so I would be really happy to keep these things going after the world goes back to a bit of normality.
Yeah. Well, for me, I know there's always a part of me that enjoy continuous learning, but when it comes to harp learning opportunities, there's not a huge amount of them in my local area. And when COVID happened and I start seeing more of these online, I get very excited because I would not be able to, for example, attend a workshop with you in the UK without spending a huge amount of money to fly myself, and figure out how to bring a harp with me. So I think I'm going to enjoy being able to learn, at the comfort of my own home. It's one of those things that I think I'm going to really relish, and hopefully you'll stay after COVID.
I think so, because I mean, even like with Winter Harp, just the costs of simply getting myself, Grania from Ireland, Tristan from Italy, and Tristan from France and Adriano from Italy together would have been, that would have been nearly £1,000 straight away. And then you add on venue hire and accommodation and all of that, and it becomes very expensive for people to attend a workshop in person. So yeah, I think there will, I hope there will still be a demand for online stuff, and I suspect there'll still be these lovely things like Edinburgh Harp Festival back in person and various other festivals, and they will be wonderful points to meet up with our friends, but I think there will still be a place for online.
Awesome. And if you're watching this and you're interested in getting a review of the workshop, leave a comment because we're going to be joining the workshop in a very short time. And if you'd like to hear about it, we would love to talk to you about it. Or if you have attended one of these workshops and you want to share your experience, feel free to share your experience too.